This is research that I conducted during my postdoc time at the Serials Lab that is led by Mohamed Khamis at the University of Glasgow. And I want to give a little shout out to my wonderful co-authors that helped me in this massive project and the massive analysis that we had to conduct. And yeah, during my time at Glasgow, I was in the quest to project users from different side channel attacks. And in this talk in particular, I'm talking about thermal attacks. So let's assume we interact with a public interface because we want to pay someone. We've done that probably today. And this creates a bit of a risk because someone could steal our credentials. Now, if we carefully cover them and make sure that no one is around, it seems that everything is all right, right? Unfortunately, that is not entirely true because even if no one shoulder surfs us, if we touch the surface of the interface, we leave heat traces with our fingers. And these heat traces are visible even after we've left. So to give you a little bit more like realistic pictures here, you see up to 60 seconds after the interaction, we can reveal the pin of someone and even a pattern. And 60 seconds is probably something where the user is long gone. So in our research, we ask ourselves first, what are protection strategies against these thermal attacks? Because the effectiveness that they worked and how our pins can be recognized have countlessly been demonstrated in the lab already. And we also wanted to know the user preferences towards these protection strategies, because if a protection strategy is unrealistic or someone might not like it, they might not use it. So how was this research project? First, we did a structured literature review where we identified 29 full papers. Then we extracted 15 strategies from these papers through expert discussions, and the full list will be in the paper. I will talk a little bit about individual strategies in this talk. Once we had these strategies, we did an online user study with 306 participants. This is the core point of this paper. So first, we asked participants how they would intuitively protect from thermal attacks. So maybe you can ask yourself, what would you do? Then we gave them these different strategies that we found in our literature search and asked them to rank them. So what is your favorite strategy? Why would you use it? But we also thought it's based on a pre-study that we did. Trust and usage intention are important factors. So we also had specific questions on whether people trust the strategy to effectively protect them and whether they want to really use this strategy, being honest with us. And this led to a massive data set. So we applied a statistical analysis on that. You can read about that on the paper. We have also really interesting, nice-looking plots. And for the qualitative answers, we applied thematic analysis. And in the rest of this talk, this is a slide that I had earlier in another talk. And using all the results we had, we built a user-centered design space. So if you want to design a mechanism and if you want to protect it against a thermal attack, you can have a look at that. Now, in the rest of this talk, I tried to put the statistical analysis and the semantic analysis a little bit together to give you like an overview of our results. I do this in 2 dimensions, user trust and usage intention. So when we look at the semantic analysis, the first common factor was that verification is really essential. Even if we haven't directly asked participants for that, many of the answers mentioned that they want to verify that they are effectively protected. And this is the case for multi-factor authentication. We all know that, and something called PEK, which is a privacy-enhancing keyboard. Some of you might use it already. That is when you unlock your phone with a PIN, the keyboard location gets shuffled. In doing that, the heat traces are at a different spot, and it's more difficult for the attacker to reconstruct the input. And this is something that participants highly trusted and had a high usage intention, even if they had extra effort. However, extra effort and resources needed by the users also played a role. So using something you already have, like your hand, or a biometric feature like your fingerprint, because biometrics aren't susceptible to thermal attacks, was also something that was kind of in the middle ground. So there was like a higher trust and a high usage intention, but not as high as the multi-factor authentication and the privacy-enhancing keyboards. Interestingly, when it came to biometrics, some participants expressed like privacy concerns because it's a public interface and you're kind of leaving your fingerprint there. So this also led them, to lower down the usage intention. Even if here the participants welcomed not having to use some kind of extra resources they have to bring, for the sake of trust, sometimes that situation might change. Remember that in the beginning I said we asked participants how they would intuitively protect. And gloves were named as the second most intuitive strategy at the beginning. Of course, gloves might not always look like these mittens that we have in the picture, there could be like different ones. And here some participants feared that the layer of fabric might be too thin and leave like additional heat traces. So here we had a little bit of a trust issue because they didn't know if the gloves are going to protect them. And if we have to use a mechanism to have a little bit more security, it shouldn't introduce any new attack vectors. As I said, in the biometric context, people had privacy concerns. And here, these two strategies from the literature, they were really interesting. One was like blowing at the interface like you would when you're eating something hot. And the other one was priming your hands. So you touch a cold surface that is like kind of next to the interface. Your hands are going to be cold, hopefully. And then you're not going to leave any heat traces. This was something for participants that was so off the daily routines, and they didn't, consider it in the connection with interaction at all, that they found it strange. And you see there was like a low trust in this situation and also low usage intention. But I said, we talk about new attack vectors. So this is not also about security and privacy. Because we had COVID, some participants feared that blowing on the interface might leave like viruses or something and might lead to health issues. So this is also something that I wouldn't have expected here. Now, finally, the parts I just showed you for like priming your hands requires the manufacturer to kind of change the interface. So they have this like cold element. And this leads to our fifth theme. Like people also kind of liked integrated protection. You see there is like a high usage intention. There are no extra resources. That kind of relates to our second theme. And also the here's the difference to our third theme with the trust is that when there are materials like kind of integrated, it's challenging to verify. So on the one hand, manufacturers might use materials where heat dissipation is just faster. But again, people can't see that. Or they might use a heated element, and some interfaces kind of accidentally have that already, because when we have our keyboards and we type on that, it's really challenging to take a thermal image of the input because the CPU is under that, and that most of the time is hot. So if you use a task that with this computation in, this light is really driving me crazy. If you use a task with high calculations, your CPU gets hot and we can't see the heat traces anymore. So here you have a little overview of these strategies I just told you about. However, I said in the beginning there are 15. There are more strategies in the paper. And interestingly, participants also gave us 3 new strategies that were not present in the literature. And one was simply like waiting in front of the interface, like a minute or so, making sure no one is around. And that kind of also works for shoulder surfing. So after our studies, we developed a design space that had these 6 dimensions. First, we considered the protection method. So what is contributing to that the user is protected? Thermal masking is you cover your hand, that you make you leave like additional heat traces. You have the heat trace manipulation with the privacy enhancing keyboard, where we kind of shift the heat traces around, but we don't change the composition of them. We have heat trace reduction, like when you cool your hands with the touching cold surface before. We have heat trace prevention, like wearing the gloves, mittens, or you could also have like a stylus or something else between your hands and the interface. Something I haven't spoken about is environment manipulation. So I can just make it really challenging that someone comes in after me and takes a thermal image of the interface. It could be in a bank, where there's like certain distances, or like might be someone making sure that no one takes a thermal image. And finally, this is also something surprising. We can manipulate the thermal camera image feed. And this is something that has already been done also by the lab where I did the research. So the thermal camera detects that there is an interface where heat traces are left, and then it obfuscates that, like by blurring the image or like just removing that. But this also, of course, has other implications. Then we considered the person who has to act to protect the user. This can be the user by themselves, the device manufacturer, and as I just explained, even the manufacturer from the thermal camera. The amount of user effort has to be considered. We considered habit-based, so participants have to configure a mechanism like once, and then they make kind of a habit of using it, like multi-factor authentication. It could be interaction-based. That means they have to do it like every time, so they can kind of forget it. So they might forget to touch like the cold surface or to blow in the interface. And of course, if it's like a heated element or something, the user doesn't have to do anything. Also consider different user resources, protection object like the gloves or a stylus to type, a software, for instance, the one that shuffles the keyboard, some kind of hardware that would be something you bring. And again, there might be also mechanisms like biometric authentication where we don't need to have any resources. We have also verifiability. I think I don't have to explain that one in detail. The user can verify that the mechanism is effective, can partially verify it. For instance, for the heated element, they see the heated element is there, but maybe they can't, we all can't see heat traces, at least not without like special glasses or so. And then we have mechanisms without any verifiability. Finally, we also looked at the universality. That means whether a protection mechanism can protect all kinds of interfaces and in different situations, or is it just based on like a specific interface? And of course, we here recommend holistic ones, and some of them even protect from other kinds of shoulder surfing thermal attacks. So usually at this point of the talk, people ask me, so what should I do if I want to right away protect myself from a thermal attack? And this is like a little quick fix that we have. So let's assume you type. Then you just put your hand on it. And this is the thermal masking strategy, so we can't see the pin anymore. So if you want to make a habit out of that right now, I'm inviting you to do that. And that also brings me to the end of my talk. So thermal imaging is a threat to knowledge-based authentication, even though it's limited to really short input. We identified 15 plus mitigation strategies for that and present a user-centered design space. This is the last talk from my leg, but I also want to make like a little advertisement for the 2 talks we had before. So if you're interested, you can scan the QR code and have a look because the talks are recorded. And with that, I'm happy to answer your questions.